Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite and Charles Collingwood in Paris, Bill Plant in Detroit, Bruce Morton at Fort Benning, Marvin Kalb at the State Department, Hal Walker in Washington, Bob Franken in Hudson, Ohio, and Morley Safer in Paris.
Good evening. With solemn ceremony in a historic cathedral and simple services in a country village, France today buried her greatest son of the century. The story via satellite from CBS News Chief European Correspondent Charles Collingwood.
To the ancient Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris today, there came from every corner of the world an unprecedented assembly of leaders to pay tribute to the memory of Charles de Gaulle. Seated first by protocol, the longest reigning monarch in the world, Haile Selassie. Near him, Prince Renier of Monaco. As the great nave filled, Archbishop Makarios of Cyprus arrived. Prince Charles, heir to the English throne, and Prime Minister Heath. Two former British Prime Ministers, Anthony Eden, now Lord Avon, and Harold Macmillan. Both had first known de Gaulle in the war, crossed many a sword with him, remained friends. Ben-Gurion and President Shazar of Israel, a nation to whom de Gaulle's attitude was often equivocal. The President of the Soviet Union, Nikolai Podgorny. One of de Gaulle's most consistent policies had been to try to build bridges between East and West. They came from all over. President Nixon had flown in overnight from the United States, was to turn around and fly back this afternoon after the ceremonies. De Gaulle had been generous about Mr. Nixon, felt Franco-American relations were improving, told visitors he thought Nixon had all that is needed to make a strong president. Charles de Gaulle in death had managed to bring together friends, enemies, and wary antagonists. The arrival of his successor, French President Pompidou, was the signal for the requiem in the cathedral to commence. As Pompidou walked down the aisle, the voices of the famous choir of Notre Dame soared into Bach's chorale of the Passion according to St. Matthew. Despite the rank and dignity of those who had come to Notre Dame to pay tribute to Charles de Gaulle, the service itself was much less elaborate than is customary when so imposing a figure passes. This was in accordance with de Gaulle's last wishes. He insisted on simplicity and no eulogies or orations. De Gaulle expressly forbade the presence of the kings and queens, presidents and prime ministers at his actual funeral in the village church near his home at Colombey-les-Deux-Églises. Thus it was that the world's great attended only this memorial service amid the ancient splendors of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. Service at Colombey was in stark contrast to the inevitable formalities in Paris. An unadorned French armored vehicle bore the simple coffin covered in the French tricolor from the de Gaulle house, La Boisserie, to the village church which he had so often attended. The little town, less than 400 souls, was packed with people from all over France. For although de Gaulle had excluded the great and famous from Colombey, he said the ordinary people could come, and they did. Inside the church, in the family pew, de Gaulle's son Philip, a captain in the French Navy, stood beside his mother Yvonne, herself now 79. Besides the de Gaulle family and the townspeople who thought of de Gaulle as one of them, there were old friends and companions of the liberation. Outside, the mourners who had journeyed from all over France crowded every available space, even breaking through the roof tiles of the modest houses to get a glimpse. Then the pallbearers, ordinary youths from the village, carried the coffin out to the grave where de Gaulle's daughter Anne already lies. De Gaulle's widow, his son, daughter, and grandchildren watched the coffin lowered and made their final gesture. It was all as Charles de Gaulle had wished it, as private a ceremony as could be arranged for so public a person. Then, quickly, the family returned to the lonely house where de Gaulle had so long preserved his own privacy. Charles Collingwood, CBS News, Paris.
Before leaving Paris on the flight home, President Nixon made a courtesy call on President Pompidou. The spokesman said their 40-minute session included a brief discussion of East-West relations. Mr. Nixon also attended a reception for foreign dignitaries where he chatted for several minutes with Soviet President Podgorny. A spokesman described their conversation as pleasantries. At one point, Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi reportedly joined them with the laughing comment, "Can a smaller country get in on the conversation before the two big countries have made all the decisions?" The spokesman said both Nixon and Podgorny replied in light vein.
There's a new small car out that has a more powerful engine than the Volkswagen Beetle. It has nearly twice the luggage space of the Volkswagen Beetle. It has a smoother ride and a shorter turning radius than the Volkswagen Beetle. It has a more elegant interior than the Volkswagen Beetle. Yet it has all the economy of the Volkswagen Beetle. What does it look like? You've been looking at it for the past 25 seconds.
$3.95! I'm Dick Butkus. Plug-in holes is my business. Plug-in holes is Prestone's business too. Prestone anti-leak antifreeze. It's got a protection plan that's ironclad. Prestone will stop most minor leaks anywhere in your cooling system, or write Union Carbide for your money back. So when it comes to plug-in holes, hit Prestone with the ironclad protection plan.
The General Motors strike moved one step closer toward its end this afternoon when the United Auto Workers GM Council approved the proposed new work contract. It would include the following features: first-year wage increases averaging 51 cents an hour, the restoration of unlimited cost of living allowances pegged to the consumer price index no matter how high it may go, and a compromise on a retirement plan. The contract will provide retirement after 30 years, but at first workers must reach age 58, later 56. Bill Plant has more details from Detroit.
UAW President Leonard Woodcock took his tentative agreement to the union's GM Council today, and the 350 delegates gave the pact their overwhelming approval. Woodcock reportedly admitted to the delegates in the closed meeting that the contract was not all that he had hoped for, but said that he believed significant overall gains had been achieved. Dissenting UAW members have mounted some opposition, charging that gains for skilled tradesmen were too small and that the union had failed to win unlimited early retirement. But most delegates, while not entirely satisfied, seemed willing to accept the settlement, particularly since they felt the alternative would be no work before the first of the year.
I think that there could have been more progress in different areas, like the 30 and out. I think it should have been completely 30 and out on service. I think the cost of living should have been restored now as it was rather than December 6th of 71.
How do you think that the rank and file membership of the UAW is going to react to this proposal?
I think in a lot of cases the rank and file are going to feel that they didn't get what was coming to them. But I think basically, as I said before, the majority will accept it.
Rank and file members of the UAW will vote soon on a new contract and will probably approve it. But the company's goal of full production by early December may still not be met if local agreements are not settled soon. Bill Plant, CBS News, Detroit.
The nation's third largest bank, the Chase Manhattan in New York, dropped its prime lending rate, the rate it charges favored customers, by 0.25% today, from 7.5% to 7.25%. Some 50 other banks across the country quickly did the same. Stock market prices fell off sharply today in moderately active trading. Volume on the New York Exchange was 12.5 million shares. Observers blame profit-taking, fears of possibly inflationary aspects in the GM settlement, and disappointment that cuts in prime interest rates were only 0.25%. The average price per share fell 39 cents on the New York Exchange and 22 cents on the American Exchange.
Right from the beginning, cigarette holders were very popular. Because they served a purpose. They kept the cigarette away from your lips. Yes, the cigarette holder was always a pretty good idea. This is today's cigarette holder. It's on the tip of every parliament. The parliament holder is tough enough to bite on, and inside there's a filter, recessed away from your lips, so you get a good, fresh taste. Parliament. It works like a cigarette holder works. A good idea never goes out of style.
At Fort Benning, Georgia, the defense challenged 3 of the first 5 prospective jurors in the murder case of First Lieutenant William Calley, Jr. Bruce Morton reports on the day's proceedings in the My Lai case.
The lawyers probed the professional soldiers who might judge William Calley. Had pretrial publicity shaped their views? How did they feel about this untraditional war? Colonel Lamar Welch, airborne veteran, 2 tours in Vietnam, a man who speaks of honor as naturally as others speak of bread. You never knew, he said, when some little 12-year-old kid would shake your hand and take your chewing gum and then dump a hand grenade. New men entering this environment are jumpy, nervous. It's the most difficult war we've ever put men in, just trying to find out who do you shoot. What takes place on a battlefield is stark terror. Stark terror. Pretrial publicity? I heard everything about this case before I was named to the court, but not since. I think this is the first time I've ever seen Lieutenant Calley face to face, but he's in my dreams and in my sleep. Defense Attorney George Latimer challenged Welch, claiming he had heard too much about the case. He remembered names. He would be influenced. Colonel Daniel Ford, combat in World War II, no time in Vietnam. He too remembered news stories of Calley, Captain Medina, Sergeant Mitchell. Latimer challenged him for the same reason. The judge will rule later on all the challenges. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Duval said he'd never heard of My Lai until he was named to the court. Where were you, wondered a lawyer. Busy, said Duval, with an Army career and night school. Today's score, 3 defense challenges, 2 jurors accepted so far, more questioning tomorrow. Today, the defense also seemed to be hinting at a later strategy, painting the people of My Lai 4 not as innocent civilians, but as Viet Cong sympathizers. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Fort Benning, Georgia.
The U.S. command in Saigon today noted 2 dramatic aspects of the Vietnam War. It said ground fighting has dropped to the lowest level in 9 months, and for the first time in 5 years, American forces had gone 2 straight days without suffering a combat death. However, some deaths, an unspecified number, were reported today. The casualty report for last week showed 31 Americans killed in action and 104 wounded, and that wounded toll is the lowest in almost 5 years. South Vietnam forces reported 216 fatalities, and enemy losses were put at 1,584. The United States in recent weeks has been trying to determine what South Vietnam's neighbor, Cambodia, requires to survive against the communists. A report on the conclusions from Marvin Kalb.
The administration has concluded, after a secret field survey, that Cambodia needs a great deal more U.S. military help in order to withstand an expected communist offensive. Therefore, the White House is now expected to ask a generally skinflint Congress for up to $1 billion in extra economic and military aid for Cambodia, Israel, and a few other governments. Officials expect no trouble on the $500 million for Israel, but they fear a new wave of protest from anti-war senators on an estimated $250 million in aid for Cambodia. That is one reason why they attached the Cambodian request to the Israeli one. Capitol Hill sources say that U.S. military attachés have begun to aid Cambodian troops in Phnom Penh and that American air and ground presence will likely increase. Today, State Department officials conceded it is possible American attachés are helping the Cambodians, but despite the expected boost in military aid, they still claim no intention of sending American ground advisors into Cambodia. Marvin Kalb, CBS News, the State Department.
At the UN today, the General Assembly began its annual China debate, and the United States again urged rejection of demands that the communists be seated in place of the nationalists. But there was no U.S. blast against Red Chinese policies, as there has been in the past, and some observers took this as a hint that Washington might not fight Peking's entry if the UN let Chiang Kai-shek's Formosan regime remain as well. Chile, under its new Marxist president, Salvador Allende, announced tonight that it is renewing diplomatic relations with communist Cuba. They had been suspended for 6 years. A Soviet court purportedly has handed out a 3-year labor camp sentence to Andrei Amalrik, who wrote the book, Will the Soviet Union Survive Until 1984? The Russian author in that work said the Soviet system already has begun disintegrating, and he predicted its collapse in the early 80s. Friends say he was convicted of spreading falsehoods against Russia. Another Soviet author, Nobel Prize winner Alexander Solzhenitsyn, has been under heavy attack at home for his novels criticizing Soviet policy. But now he has been openly defended by Mstislav Rostropovich, one of the world's greatest cellists and a member of the Soviet cultural establishment. In a letter circulated in Moscow, Rostropovich described Solzhenitsyn as a man who has suffered the right to tell the truth. Rostropovich also condemned the repression of Soviet intellectuals in general. The American Yippie leader, Jerry Rubin, ignored a government order in Britain to leave that country today. He said he and his followers will stay on in Belfast to help what he called the revolutionary socialist movement there. Rubin invited the British Home Secretary, Reginald Maulding, to a Yippie news conference tomorrow for a confrontation. The Kansas Attorney General has nullified the election as Justice of the Peace of a hippie who describes himself as a dope seller, 23-year-old Philip Hill. The Attorney General ruled that legislation 2 years ago left JPs with no authority but to perform marriages and effectively abolished the office in first and second-class cities. The ruling not only nullifies Hill's election in Lawrence, but also some others elsewhere.
Toulouse-Lautrec, Catherine the Great, Josephine.
You're late. Leonard.
Edna. Mr. Twain, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Mona, Cleo.
You're looking fine.
Mogan David, Concord Wine.
Mogan David.
Name dropper. Rich, sweet, straight, with a bubbly, on the rocks. The right name to drop, whoever drops in.
Mogan David.
Name dropper.
After 25 years of being the undisputed king of the small car world, the Volkswagen Beetle is in trouble. For there's a new car out that combines all the economy of a VW with a more powerful engine, nearly twice the luggage space, a more elegant interior, a smoother ride, a shorter turning radius. The car destined to dethrone the Volkswagen Beetle? The Volkswagen Super Beetle.
In just 4 months, as the nation's top admiral, Elmo Zumwalt has established himself as the sailor's admiral. The new chief of naval operations told a news conference today that he has issued 57 orders designed to humanize the Navy. Hal Walker reports.
The swinging, sideburned 49-year-old admiral hopes to boost enlistments by easing hair and beard regulations, starting rock and roll service clubs, and selling beer in the barracks, among other things.
My theory is that we should treat our naval personnel as grown and mature individuals and to permit them to do everything consistent with the maintenance of good order and discipline. It just happens that a lot of the early emphasis has been on the very young, because there it was easy to identify the problems quickly, and many of them it was easy to do something about rather quickly.
Sir, I believe the Russian Navy has women aboard ship, usually in medical corps. Have you thoughts, perhaps, of the...
Yes, many times, especially when I was a young man.
Admiral Zumwalt said the cost of ensuring privacy militated against women on shipboard. In office just 4 months, Zumwalt said his eyes have been opened to the real problems of blacks and Filipinos in the service, and he pledged efforts to improve both morale and opportunities. Al Walker, CBS News, Washington.
A month ago, the Internal Revenue Service announced temporary suspension and study of the tax exemption granted foundations promoting anti-pollution suits. Well, today, after pressure from both inside and outside the administration, Commissioner Randolph Thrower said the tax-exempt status will be continued. The federal government is asking the nation's airlines voluntarily to stop dumping an estimated 6,700 tons per year of jet fuel into the skies near airports. The fuel in question is the residue that seeps into holding tanks when jet engines are stopped. Once discarded in the air, after takeoff, it either falls to the ground as liquid or stays there as a noxious mist. The Air Transport Association says the airlines are trying to find other ways to dispose of the fuel. 4 persons, including 3 bystanders, were killed today in Hudson, Ohio by a series of fiery explosions from a propane gas plant. The details from Bob Franklin of station WJW-TV in Cleveland.
The explosive fire apparently started when a truck clipped a propane tank at Hudson Fuel Gas Corporation, sending flames raging through the plant and over 100 feet in the air. 4 were killed. Much of the area was devastated. The dead include a company foreman and 3 of 4 passengers in a compact car that happened to pass by just as the blast erupted. Flashes of flame plagued firefighters all day, even after they controlled the massive blaze that damaged buildings hundreds of yards away. Residents were evacuated from the area. The wife and daughter of a local science teacher died in the car.
The area was becoming involved and closed with fog, and got within 50 feet of our building, and I saw a little Volkswagen drive through it, and about that time the thing just blew up. The whole fog just blew up at one time.
Well, from what I understand by talking to some of the people around, they had stopped to take a look at the fire. They had heard something or had noticed the fire and they had stopped. They had, the husband and the wife, I guess, had gotten out of the car, and when it had really let go, and they really didn't stand too much of a chance. Mother was burned. I guess she died almost immediately, and the 2 kids were stuck in the back seat, and there was really not too much left of them.
Local officials are quoted as saying they considered the plant location a hazard. Today, their worst fears were realized. This is Bob Franken, CBS News in Hudson, Ohio.
9 oil workers were killed last night in a field near Tulsa, Oklahoma, by a premature explosion of a secret substance that was hoped would blast free underground oil deposits. The volatile liquid was being tested jointly by 2 oil firms, Commercial Solvents Company of New York and the Pan American Oil Company, a subsidiary of Standard Oil of Indiana, when it went off above ground. It not only killed 9 employees, it also blew a crater 50 feet wide and 10 feet deep and knocked out electrical wires, creating an overnight power failure for miles around. The explosion shattered a nearby truck loaded with sticks of dynamite. Unexploded sticks were scattered in the wreckage, creating an additional hazard for investigators, already worried that more of that mysterious liquid might still be around. The accident is said to be one of the worst in the history of the Oklahoma oil fields. Police in Carbondale, Illinois say 10 persons were wounded, none seriously, early today in a series of gunfights with civilians, some of whom identified themselves as Black Panthers. The wounded included 1 policeman and 3 security guards from the campus of Southern Illinois University. In Santa Cruz, California, John Lindley Frazier pleaded innocent today to the murders last month of Dr. Victor Ota, his wife, 2 sons, and a secretary. Frazier's lawyer has permission to change the plea later on to insanity if he wishes. A private citizens group charging both the broadcast industry and the Federal Communications Commission with foot dragging has gone to court in an effort to prevent children from seeing violence on television. In a test case, the Foundation to Improve Television has asked federal court in Washington, D.C. to enjoin local station WTOP-TV from showing reruns of the CBS production Wild Wild West late in the afternoon.
I never knew I had so many places to hurt.
Here, take these.
Really? For sore muscles?
For fast relief from the pain of sore, aching muscles, take Bayer aspirin. Bayer is 100% aspirin, and aspirin is what doctors recommend.
Feeling better, dear.
Me? That little workout didn't bother me.
Bayer works wonders.
Hello?
I'm conducting a survey on laxatives.
Oh, we use Phillips Milk of Magnesia.
Well, what about stimulants, bulks, lubricants?
We don't use them.
You sound rather sure of yourself.
Doctors recommend Milk of Magnesia more often than anything else.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So when we need a laxative, we choose Phillips Milk of Magnesia because Phillips is thorough, gentle, and the kind of laxative doctors recommend most often. Okay? Bye.
Well, that makes sense.
The most moving tribute to Charles de Gaulle came not in the Notre Dame Cathedral, nor in the village of Colombey, but in the dark and rainy streets of Paris. Morley Safer reports.
And Paris remains in mourning. Here along the Champs-Élysées, the great avenue that has witnessed so many of France's greatest moments and its worst tragedies, hundreds of thousands of Parisians have come to pay a final citizen's tribute to de Gaulle. People come to the Champs-Élysées almost instinctively. As a final visual blow of defeat to the French people, Hitler's victorious armies marched down here 30 years ago. And on August 5th, 1944, Charles de Gaulle, with thousands of Parisians following him, walked here to mark the liberation of Paris. And tonight, in pouring rain, a silent walk from the Place de la Concorde to the Arc de Triomphe. And the eternal flame at the tomb of the unknown soldier. Some of them here tonight were not even born when de Gaulle kept France's hopes alive during the worst days of the war. But many old soldiers are here too, anciens combattants of both wars, here tonight with their medals and their campaign ribbons, and all moving up the boulevard to pause for a moment at the eternal flame. De Gaulle's support over the years did not come from one political faction or another. It came from the people. He had for them something of the soul of France in him, and they responded instinctively to it. Morley Safer, CBS News, Paris.
And that's the way it is. Thursday, November 12th, 1970. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News. Good night.
Never pick up a stranger. If you do, you might be sad. Don't take chances. Pick up Prestone. The protection plan is ironclad.
Prestone protects against freeze-ups, against corrosion, against most minor leaks. Or write Union Carbide for your money back. Prestone antifreeze.
The protection plan is ironclad.
Mogan David Blackberry wine, please. The wine with the natural fruit flavor. I happen to like it straight, but some prefer it mixed with soda or even on the rocks.
Your Blackberry wine, sir.
Mogan David.
Name dropper?
Be a name dropper. Ask for Mogan David Blackberry wine.
Direct from our newsroom in New York, in color, this has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite. Hot water and plenty of it is the call that leads to comedy when the stork springs a surprise on Uncle Bill in French of Family Affair tonight. Natalie Wood and Robert Redford star in This Property is Condemned, this week's powerful and dramatic CBS Thursday night movie. See it at 9, 8 Central Time tonight on CBS.
Governor Ellington says that the Democratic Party must abandon its liberal image. Details coming up next on Channel 5 News.
I'd like to get you a case of Schlitz malt liquor, but I'd rather not go in there.
Why? What's in there besides Schlitz malt liquor?
That's what's in there.
The bull on the label? You believe that stuff about boldness in the bull?
You wouldn't believe how I believe.
Well, bull or not, I'd like my Schlitz malt liquor. It's what I came in here for, a case of
As far
Schlitz
as we
malt
know,
liquor.
the Schlitz Malt Liquor Bull is only a symbol. We think when you make a malt liquor as big and brawny, as bold and robust